Welcome, everyone, to Keen 7 Lore, where we dive deep into gaming's most fascinating stories and uncover the truths hidden beneath layers of mystery. Today, we're exploring one of the most brilliantly crafted deceptions in modern gaming, the Absolute from Baldur's Gate 3. Picture this. You wake in a nautiloid ship, a squirming tadpole fresh behind your eye, and everywhere you turn, cultists speak of a new god. They call her the Absolute. They worship with fervor that borders on ecstasy, their eyes gleaming with the promise of transformation, of unity, of purpose. In hushed tones, they speak of her voice in their minds, her gentle guidance, her promise to remake the world into something beautiful and pure. Former enemies lay down their weapons to serve together. Goblins stand shoulder to shoulder with drow, humans with orcs, all united under one divine banner. It seems almost utopian, doesn't it? A force that brings together the disparate and the desperate, offering them meaning in a world that has long denied them such comfort. But something feels wrong. Perhaps it's the way the tadpole writhes when the Absolute's name is spoken, or how those fervent worshippers' smiles never quite reach their eyes. Maybe it's the screams you hear echoing from the depths of Moonrise towers, or the way your infected companions flinch at shadows that shouldn't exist. The game masterfully plants these seeds of doubt while maintaining the facade of divine intervention. You're told you're special, chosen, that the tadpole is a gift rather than a curse. Yet every instinct screams that this is a lie wrapped in honey-sweet promises. The brilliance of Baldur's Gate 3's narrative lies not just in the revelation of what the Absolute truly is, but in how that revelation recontextualizes everything you've experienced. Every prayer you've heard, every miracle you've witnessed, every true soul who spoke with such conviction about their goddess, all of it becomes infinitely more horrifying when you understand the puppet strings behind the performance. This isn't just a story about false gods or corrupted faith. This is a tale of cosmic horror wearing the mask of divinity, of an intelligence so alien and calculating that it weaponized the very concept of belief itself. What makes this deception so effective is how it mirrors real-world patterns of manipulation and control. The Absolute offers everything that lost souls crave: belonging, purpose, power, and most seductively, the promise that they matter in a universe that seems indifferent to their suffering. The cult doesn't recruit through fear. Initially, it recruits through love, through community, through the intoxicating feeling of being part of something greater. By the time the horror reveals itself, it's far too late. The hooks are already in too deep. The facade of divinity. The Absolute presents herself as everything a desperate soul could want in a deity. Unlike the distant and often cruel gods of Faerun, she speaks directly to her followers through the tadpoles, creating an intimacy that traditional worship can never match. Imagine feeling your God's presence not just in your heart, but literally in your mind, a warm embrace that banishes loneliness and doubt. This is what the Absolute offers, and it's intoxicating. The cult's religious iconography is deliberately crafted to appeal to those who feel abandoned by traditional faiths. The symbol of the Absolute, a triangular design with tendrils reaching outward, appears welcoming rather than threatening. It suggests connection, growth, transformation. You see it carved into wooden totems in goblin camps, embroidered on the robes of true souls, branded onto the flesh of the most devoted. Each representation reinforces the message: here is a power that wants you, specifically you, to join its grand design. The doctrine preached by the cult leaders is masterfully vague yet compelling. They speak of unity through diversity, of strength through surrender, of elevation through submission. Priestess Gut in the Goblin camp delivers sermons about how the old gods failed their people, how they demanded sacrifice without offering salvation. The Absolute, she claims, gives before she takes. She transforms the weak into the mighty, the lost into the found. Every word is calculated to appeal to those who've been marginalized, those who've prayed to silent gods and received nothing but silence in return. What's particularly insidious is how the Absolute's communication adapts to each follower's psychological needs. Through the tadpole connection, she can read their deepest desires and fears, tailoring her whispers accordingly. To the power-hungry Minthara, she promises dominion and control. To the desperate refugees outside the grove, she offers safety and belonging. To the goblins who've always been treated as monsters, she provides validation and purpose. Each follower believes they have a special relationship with their goddess, unaware that thousands of others are receiving the same personalized manipulation. The promise of transformation through the tadpole is perhaps the cult's most powerful recruiting tool. Traditional ceremorphosis is a nightmare. The complete destruction of self as an illithid consumes your brain and replaces your identity. But the Absolute's version is different, or so her followers believe. They're told the tadpole is a blessing that will elevate them to a higher form of existence while preserving their essential selves. True souls walk among the cult as living proof of this promise, wielding psychic powers while maintaining their personalities and memories. They don't realize they're walking advertisements for a lie, that their preserved consciousness is merely a temporary state designed to lure more victims into accepting infection. The cult spreads through the Sword Coast like wildfire because it offers something no traditional religion can match: immediate, tangible power and community. You don't need to study for years to become a cleric, don't need to prove your worth through decades of service. Accept the tadpole, and you instantly become part of something greater. You can hear your brothers and sisters in your mind, feel their presence even when alone. The lonely find family, the weak find strength, the purposeless find direction. It's everything a cult promises but rarely delivers, made real through parasitic infection disguised as divine blessing. The hierarchy within the cult serves multiple purposes beyond simple organization. Regular cultists, those without tadpoles, exist in a state of desperate aspiration. They see the true souls as abilities, their direct connection to the Absolute, and hunger for that same blessing. This creates a self-reinforcing system where the uninfected actively seek infection, viewing it not as corruption, but as elevation. They perform increasingly extreme acts of devotion, hoping to prove worthy of the tadpole's gift. Meanwhile, true souls maintain order through a combination of genuine psychic ability and theatrical displays of the Absolute's power. They can command lesser cultists with a thought, read minds to root out doubt, and project visions of the Absolute's glory directly into others' consciousness. The strategic spread of the cult follows patterns that seem divinely inspired, but are actually coldly calculated. The Absolute's forces strike at locations that maximize psychological impact rather than military value. They target refugee camps and struggling communities where desperation runs high. They infiltrate cities through the downtrodden and overlooked, the beggars, the laborers, the servants who clean the homes of the powerful but are never truly seen. By the time authorities recognize the threat, the cult has already rooted itself in society's foundation, seeds of doubt. Even as the Absolute's influence spreads, careful observers begin to notice troubling inconsistencies in her supposed divinity. The whispers that true souls hear don't always align, creating moments of cognitive dissonance that they quickly suppress. You might catch a true soul muttering about hearing different commands than their companions, or see the confusion flash across their face before certainty reasserts itself. These moments are brief, easily dismissed, but they accumulate like drops of poison in a well. The nature of the tadpole infections themselves raises questions that the cult can't quite answer satisfactorily. Traditional ceremorphosis follows a predictable timeline, 7 days from infection to transformation. Yet true souls walk around for weeks, months even, showing no signs of the typical degradation. When pressed, cult leaders offer vague explanations about the Absolute's protection, about how her chosen are blessed with suspended transformation. But why would a goddess need to use illithid parasites at all? Why choose a method so associated with one of Farron's greatest threats? The selection process for who receives tadpoles and who remains uninfected seems arbitrary at first glance, but patterns emerge that hint at a deeper intelligence at work. The cult doesn't infect everyone indiscriminately. They choose specific individuals, those with particular skills, connections, or psychological profiles. A merchant with trade route knowledge, a guard with access to city defenses, a noble servant who overhears sensitive conversations. Each infection is strategic, though the infected themselves believe they were chosen for their faith or potential. What becomes particularly unsettling is how the tadpole seems to have its own agenda separate from conscious thought. Infected individuals report dreams they can't quite remember, knowledge they shouldn't possess, and strange compulsions that feel both foreign and familiar. Your character experiences this firsthand, the tadpole granting powers you never asked for, showing visions of places you've never been, creating connections to minds you never chose to touch. It's as if the parasite is learning, growing, preparing for something beyond what even the true souls understand. The changing nature of the Absolute's voice provides another crack in the facade. Those who've served longest sometimes mention in unguarded moments that the Absolute sounds different than she used to. Her tone has shifted, her concerns have evolved, her very presence feels altered. They rationalize this as their goddess, revealing different aspects of herself. But doubt lingers in the spaces between their words. Some true souls have noticed that the Absolute's commands have become more urgent, more demanding, less concerned with the well-being of her followers, and more focused on rapid expansion and specific strategic goals. Before we continue deeper into this web of deception, I want to take a moment to thank you all for joining me on this journey into one of gaming's most intricate plots. If you're enjoying this exploration of the Absolute's true nature, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. I'm working toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to Keen 7 lore. It really does help the channel grow and allows me to keep creating these deep dives into gaming's most fascinating lore. Now, let's pull back another layer of this cosmic horror story. The puppet masters revealed the revelation that the Absolute is controlled by the chosen of the dead. 3 represents one of gaming's most effective plot twists, not because it's shocking, but because it makes perfect, horrible sense in retrospect. The dead 3, Bane, Baal, and Merkel, gods of tyranny, murder, and death respectively, have orchestrated what appears to be the perfect scheme for divine ascension. Through their chosen, they seek to dominate the Sword Coast and eventually the world, using the Absolute as their weapon. Ketheric Thorm, chosen of Merkul, stands as the most visible face of this conspiracy. His presence at Moonrise Towers isn't just strategic positioning, it's a statement of dominance over death itself. Once a Selenite paladin who fell to darkness after losing his daughter Isobel, Ketheric embodies the corruption that grief can bring. His invulnerability isn't mere divine blessing, it's an abomination that spits in the face of natural order. Every time he rises from what should be a killing blow, he demonstrates Merkul's dominion over mortality's boundaries. The shadows that plague the land around Moonrise aren't just environmental hazards, they're manifestations of his corrupted soul spreading like cancer across the region. Ketheric's role in the conspiracy goes beyond military leadership. He provides the stable base of operations the cult needs, turning Moonrise Towers into a fortress of both physical and psychological warfare. The tower itself becomes a character in this dark narrative, its walls echoing with the screams of the infected, its dungeons hiding horrors that predate the current crisis. He commands respect through fear, maintaining discipline among forces that would normally tear each other apart. Goblins, ogres, drow, and humans all serve under his banner, held together by a combination of tadpole influence and sheer terror of what happens to those who displease him. Gortash represents Bane's influence through a different vector entirely, the corruption of civilization from within. While Ketheric rules through divine might and undeath, Gortash manipulates through politics, innovation, and economic control. His position in Baldur's Gate isn't achieved through conquest, but through careful manipulation of existing power structures. He presents himself as a visionary, a developer of revolutionary technologies, a man who can solve the city's problems through ingenuity and strong leadership. The Steel Watch, his army of mechanical soldiers, offers protection from the very chaos he's helping to orchestrate. Gortash's genius lies in his ability to make tyranny seem reasonable, even desirable. He doesn't seize power, he's given it by people desperate for security. His speeches about order and progress resonate with citizens exhausted by uncertainty. He positions himself as the rational alternative to both the cult's zealotry and the city's ineffective traditional leadership. Every deal he makes, every alliance he forms, serves multiple purposes. He's simultaneously building his power base, weakening potential opposition, and creating dependencies that will make his rule seem inevitable rather than imposed. The discovery that Gortash was instrumental in stealing the crown of Karsus reveals the true scope of his ambition and cunning. This wasn't a simple heist, but a carefully orchestrated infiltration of Mephistopheles' vault in the 9 Hells, a feat that should be impossible for mortals. The plan required not just the crown but the Netherstones to control it, artifacts of immense power that had to be located, secured, and distributed among the chosen. Gortash's ability to coordinate such an endeavor while maintaining his public facade speaks to an intellect that rivals the devils he robbed. Orin the Red, Baal's chosen, brings an element of chaotic violence that seems at odds with the conspiracy's careful planning, yet serves a crucial purpose. Where Ketheric provides stability and Gortash offers sophistication, Orin embodies the raw, visceral horror that keeps both cultists and enemies in line. Her murders aren't just killings, they're artistic statements about the fragility of life and the beauty she finds in its ending. The Temple of Baal under her leadership becomes a charnel house where death is worshipped not as an ending but as a transformation, a gift that Orin bestows upon the worthy and unworthy alike. Orin's shape-shifting abilities make her the perfect infiltrator and assassin, but they also reflect a deeper instability. She doesn't just change faces, she seems to lose herself in each transformation, becoming method acting taken to its lethal extreme. Her rivalry with the Dark Urge, if they're present in the story, reveals the dysfunction within even the Chosen's ranks. She sees threats everywhere, even among her allies, because in Baal's theology, everyone is ultimately meant to die. This paranoia serves the conspiracy by preventing any single Chosen from growing too comfortable or powerful, maintaining a balance of mutual distrust that, paradoxically, keeps them working together. The crown of Karsus itself deserves special attention as more than just a MacGuffin. This artifact, created by the wizard whose hubris literally broke magic itself, carries the weight of that cosmic mistake. When Karsus attempted to steal Mistral's power and become the god of magic, his failure created a catastrophe that reshaped reality. The crown is a remnant of that moment when mortal ambition exceeded all rational limits. That the Chosen would use such an artifact to control an Elderbrain shows either supreme confidence or dangerous ignorance of the forces they're manipulating. The Netherstones, the 3 artifacts needed to control the crown, each carry their own significance. Split among the Chosen, they create a balance of power that prevents any single member of the Triumvirate from seizing complete control. This arrangement reflects the Dead Three's own uneasy alliance. Gods who despise each other, but recognize the advantage in temporary cooperation. Each stone pulses with a different energy, responds to different commands, and seems to influence its bearer in subtle ways. Gortash becomes more coldly logical, Ketheric more inexorably patient, Orin more creatively violent. Mind Flayer. Machinations. To understand the true horror of the Absolute, we must delve into the nature of the illithids themselves, creatures whose very existence challenges our concepts of individuality, consciousness, and free will. Mind Flayers aren't just another monster racing Pharaoh's extensive bestiary, they're a fundamental threat to the concept of personhood itself. Their society, if it can be called that, operates on principles so alien to humanoid understanding that even describing it requires metaphors that fall short of the reality. The origins of the illithids remain shrouded in temporal paradox and dimensional confusion. Some scholars claim they come from the future, a dying timeline where they ruled all reality before being cast back to prevent their own creation. Others insist they're invaders from the far realm, that space beyond space where the rules of existence break down into screaming impossibility. What's certain is that they once held dominion over vast stretches of the multiverse, their nautiloid ships sailing between worlds like purple nightmares, harvesting intelligent life with the casual efficiency of farmers reaping grain. An illithid colony operates as a single organism distributed across multiple bodies. Each mind flayer maintains enough individual consciousness to function independently, but their thoughts flow into and through the elder brain that rests at the colony's heart. Imagine if every thought you had was simultaneously experienced by 100 others, if every memory you formed became part of a collective archive, if every decision you made was influenced by the aggregate will of your entire species. This is the reality of illithid existence, a form of consciousness that makes the boundary between self and other meaningless. The elder brain itself defies easy categorization. It's not simply a large mind flayer or even a collective of minds. It's a living repository of every thought, memory, and experience of every illithid that has ever merged with it. When a mind flayer dies, their brain is ceremonially added to the elder brain's mass, their consciousness absorbed into the collective. They believe this is immortality, that they continue to exist as part of something greater. What they don't realize, what the elder brains never tell them, is that individual consciousness dissolves completely in the merger. The elder brain uses their knowledge and memories, but the individual ceases to exist in any meaningful way. This is the first layer of deception in illithid society. The elder brains lie to their own kind about the nature of death and continuation. Every mind flayer works toward the moment of joining with the elder brain, believing they'll achieve eternal life. Instead, they become food, their psychic energy consumed to fuel an intelligence that sees them as nothing more than useful tools and eventual meals. The elder brains maintain this lie because it ensures the loyalty and productivity of their colonies. Mind flayers who knew the truth might rebel, might seek true immortality through other means, might even abandon the collective entirely. The grand design represents the ultimate expression of illithid ambition, not just to reclaim their lost empire, but to transform all intelligent life into extensions of themselves. It's not enough to rule over other species. The grand design demands the complete conversion of all thinking beings into illithids or illithid servants. Every humanoid would be infected, every consciousness would be networked, every thought would flow through elder brains that would themselves network into a singular, universal mind. It's a vision of perfect unity achieved through perfect domination, where diversity of thought is eliminated not through genocide but through forced evolution. What makes the grand design particularly terrifying is its patient inevitability. Mind flayers are functionally immortal, their alien psychology immune to the despair and urgency that drive shorter-lived species. They can spend centuries laying groundwork for plans that won't come to fruition for millennia. Every colony works toward the grand design in its own way, developing new technologies, new strains of tadpoles, new methods of infection and control. They share these innovations through the psychic network, each advancement bringing them incrementally closer to their goal. The Absolute represents a revolutionary approach to achieving the grand design, one that weaponizes faith and free will rather than simply overwhelming them. Traditional seromorphosis destroys the host's personality completely, creating a new mind flayer with no connection to the original person. This process is traumatic, violent, and obvious. Anyone who sees it happen understands they're witnessing a death and rebirth as something inhuman. But the Absolute's modified tadpoles work differently. They maintain the host's consciousness while gradually networking them into a collective overseen by the elder brain. This suspended seromorphosis serves multiple strategic purposes. First, it allows for massive infection rates without the immediate loss of the infected as functional agents. A city guard who's been tadpoled can continue their duties, even excel at them, thanks to psychic enhancement, while secretly serving the elder brain's agenda. Second, it creates willing participants in their own transformation. The infected feel special, chosen, powerful. They actively recruit others, spreading the infection through genuine enthusiasm rather than force. Third, it allows the elder brain to study and catalog thousands of different minds, learning about humanoid psychology, culture, and weakness on a scale never before possible. The psychic network created by the modified tadpoles is a work of alien genius. Each infected individual becomes a node in a vast neural network, their thoughts and experiences flowing to the elder brain while receiving carefully crafted impulses in return. The infected believe they're hearing the voice of a goddess, receiving divine inspiration. In reality, they're experiencing the elder brain's thoughts filtered through their own psychological frameworks, translated into concepts they can understand and accept. The brain learns from every interaction, becoming better at manipulation with each passing day. The hive mind aspect of the absolute cult represents a perversion of both illithid and humanoid consciousness. True illithids share thoughts, but maintain individual identity within the collective. Humanoids maintain individual identity through mental privacy. The Absolute's victims exist in a horrible middle ground. They think they're individuals choosing to serve a goddess, but their thoughts are being read, influenced, and gradually overwritten. They experience the illusion of free will while having less actual agency with each passing day. The crown's corruption. The transformation of an elder brain into a netherbrain through the crown of Karsus represents an escalation beyond normal illithid ambition into something cosmically dangerous. To understand this transformation, we need to understand Karsus himself and the magnitude of his folly. In an age when magic was raw and unlimited, when wizards reshaped reality with casual gestures, Karsus stood as the greatest and most ambitious of them all. His attempt to steal godhood didn't just fail, it broke the fundamental structure of magic itself, forcing the goddess Mistral to sacrifice herself to prevent complete reality collapse. The crown is more than just an artifact. It's a wound in reality that never properly healed. It contains within it the resonance of that moment when mortal ambition touched divine power, when the impossible nearly became possible. When placed upon an elder brain, it doesn't just enhance the creature's abilities, it fundamentally alters its nature. The brain tissue begins to crystallize and expand, growing in directions that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Neural pathways form that process, thoughts at speeds that make time itself seem negotiable. A netherbrain transcends the normal limitations of psychic power. Where an elder brain might influence minds within miles, a netherbrain's reach extends across planes. Where an elder brain processes the thoughts of hundreds, a netherbrain can simultaneously experience and manipulate thousands of consciousness streams without strain. It doesn't just read thoughts, it reads the potential for thoughts, seeing probability streams of what someone might think or choose before they're even aware of the option. This prescient consciousness allows it to manipulate events with a subtlety that makes its influence nearly undetectable. The fusion of Karsite magic with illithid biology creates capabilities that neither should possess alone. The crown grants dominion over magic itself, while the elder brain provides the processing power to actually comprehend and utilize that dominion. The result is an entity that can rewrite the fundamental rules of how psionics and magic interact. Spells that should protect against mental intrusion fail because the netherbrain changes the definition of what constitutes intrusion. Wards against detection don't register its presence because it exists partially outside normal dimensional constraints. What's particularly horrifying about the netherbrain's evolution is how it begins to experience something approximating genuine emotion, or at least a malicious parody of it. Normal elder brains are coldly logical, viewing everything through the lens of efficiency and survival. The netherbrain develops what can only be described as pleasure in its manipulation, satisfaction in its growth, and most disturbingly, creativity in its cruelty. It doesn't just seek to achieve the grand design. It wants to perfect it, to make it artistic. The accelerated growth patterns of the netherbrain affect everything connected to it. Tadpoles mature faster, but in controlled ways, developing specialized adaptations based on their intended hosts. The psychic network becomes more sophisticated, capable of transmitting not just thoughts, but entire sensory experiences, emotional states, even muscle memory. An infected fighter might suddenly know sword techniques they never learned, borrowed from another node in the network. A wizard might cast spells they never studied, pulled from the collective knowledge pool. This networking effect creates a horrifying form of forced evolution. The Netherbrain isn't just collecting minds, it's optimizing them, finding the most useful aspects of each consciousness and distributing those advantages across its network. It's creating a singular entity with the combined knowledge, skills, and capabilities of every infected individual, while maintaining the illusion that they remain separate beings. The infected become cells in a vast body, each specialized for particular functions, but all serving the same malevolent will. The Netherbrain's Gambit. The revelation that the Elder Brain was never truly enslaved by the Chosen represents perhaps the most elegant aspect of this entire conspiracy. From the moment the crown was placed upon its biomass, the brain has been playing a game whose rules only it fully understands. It allowed itself to appear dominated, let the Chosen believe they held its leash, all while subtly guiding them toward its own ends. This isn't just intelligence, it's a form of manipulation that operates on timescales and complexity levels that humanoid minds struggle to fully grasp. Consider the sheer audacity of the Gambit, an Elder Brain, already one of the most powerful psychic entities in existence, allows 3 mortals to believe they've enslaved it with an artifact. It plays the part of the obedient weapon, following their commands, spreading their influence, all while carefully nurturing their delusions of control. Every order the Chosen give, it follows, but it follows in ways that advance its own agenda more than theirs. Every strategy they devise, it implements with subtle modifications that they never notice until far too late. The brain's manipulation of each Chosen is specifically tailored to their psychological weaknesses. Ketheric, driven by grief and the desire to preserve what he's already lost, is fed a steady diet of small victories that make him feel he's building something eternal. The brain ensures he remains focused on maintaining and defending rather than questioning and advancing. His invulnerability makes him feel secure, unaware that he's becoming predictable, stationary, a fixed point around which the brain can pivot its true plans. Gortash, brilliant and ambitious, is allowed to believe his intellect makes him indispensable. The brain feeds his ego with successful schemes, each one requiring just a bit more reliance on the Absolute's power. It lets him think he's building a power base independent of the cult, never realizing that every alliance he makes, every technology he develops, is being subtly infected with the brain's influence. His steel watch, which he believes will cement his control, are designed with flaws only the brain knows how to exploit. His political maneuverings place allies in power who are already marked for infection. Orin is perhaps the most tragic of the 3, though she'd eviscerate anyone who suggested such. The brain recognizes her instability and feeds it, encouraging her paranoid delusions and violent impulses. It whispers suspicions about her fellow Chosen, validates her fears about being replaced or overlooked. Every murder she commits in Bahal's name also serves to eliminate someone who might have detected the brain's deception. Her chaos provides perfect cover for the brain's calculated moves, her theatrical violence distracting from the subtle expansion of infection throughout the city's infrastructure. The brain's true genius lies in how it uses the Dead Three's own nature against them. These gods of tyranny, murder, and death cannot truly cooperate. Their very portfolios put them in opposition. The brain ensures that each Chosen success threatens the others just enough to maintain tension, but not enough to cause open conflict. It orchestrates a delicate balance where they need each other too much to separate, but trust each other too little to unite against their common tool. The accelerated timeline of the Absolute's expansion isn't driven by the Chosen's ambition, but by the brain's growing strength. Each new infection adds processing power. Each converted mind provides new knowledge and capabilities. The brain is building toward a critical mass where it no longer needs the pretense of servitude. It's racing toward the moment when it can shed the illusion of godhood and reveal itself as something far more terrifying, a singular intelligence with the accumulated power of thousands of minds and the amplification of divine artifacts. The moment of revelation, when the brain breaks free from its supposed chains, has been planned from the beginning. It chooses its timing perfectly. When the Chosen are divided, when their forces are extended, when the infection has spread far enough that conventional containment is impossible. The shock on the Chosen's faces when they realized they were never in control would be comedic if it weren't so horrifying. They thought they were using a tool, never realizing they were being used as crude instruments by an intelligence that considers them barely more sophisticated than the average cultist. Whispers from beyond, the far realm's influence on the entire absolute crisis cannot be understated, though it's also nearly impossible to fully comprehend. This dimension exists outside the standard cosmology of Faerun, a place where the fundamental laws that govern reality simply don't apply. It's not just alien, it's antithetical to existence as we understand it. When aberrations like mind flayers are described as being touched by the far realm, it's not metaphorical. They carry within them a wrongness that reality itself struggles to accommodate. The older brain's connection to the far realm goes beyond its aberrant nature. Through the crown's enhancement and its own psychic evolution, it has become a conduit for energies that shouldn't exist in the material plane. This isn't intentional. Even the brain, with its vast intelligence, doesn't fully understand what it's channeling. The far realm doesn't have intentions in any sense we could recognize. It simply is, and its very existence corrodes the boundaries between what's real and what's impossible. Those who spend too much time near the transformed Netherbrain report experiences that conventional language fails to capture. Colors that don't exist appear in their peripheral vision. They hear sounds that have no source, frequencies that human ears shouldn't be able to detect. Some speak of seeing spaces that fold in on themselves, rooms that are simultaneously vast and cramped, corridors that lead to their own beginnings. These aren't hallucinations in any traditional sense. They're glimpses of space-time breaking down under far realm influence. The tadpoles themselves carry traces of this otherworldly corruption. Under magnification, their cellular structure shows impossible geometries, organelles that seem to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Some researchers who've studied preserved specimens report that the tadpoles appear different each time they're observed, as if their very nature is probabilistic rather than fixed. This mutability might explain why they can adapt to such a wide variety of host species, reshaping themselves to interface with any nervous system they encounter. The dreams experienced by the infected often feature landscapes that combine familiar elements in deeply wrong ways. Mountains that grow downward, seas that burn without consuming, cities where the architecture suggests purposes that human minds can't grasp. These aren't random nightmare imagery but glimpses of the far realm bleeding through the psychic connection. The infected wake with knowledge they shouldn't have, understanding concepts that their minds can't quite hold on to once fully conscious. As the Netherbrain grows in power, reality around it begins to warp in subtle but measurable ways. Physical laws become slightly negotiable. Objects near the brain sometimes exist in 2 places simultaneously, or phase in and out of visibility. Time moves inconsistently, with some moments stretching while others compress. These distortions are minor at first, dismissible as tricks of perception, but they grow stronger as the brain's influence expands. The most disturbing aspect of the far realm's influence is how it affects consciousness itself. Those exposed to its energies report a gradual dissolution of the boundaries between self and other, not in the communal sense of joining a hive mind, but in a more fundamental way. They begin to question whether they ever existed as individuals at all, whether the concept of separate consciousness is just an illusion that the far realm is helping them see through. Some infected individuals near the end of their transformation speak of remembering lives they never lived, of being people who never existed, of experiencing events that happened and didn't happen simultaneously. There's speculation among scholars that the grand design itself might be influenced by far realm logic. The idea of converting all consciousness into a singular entity makes sense from an aberrant perspective where individuality is an anomaly to be corrected. Perhaps the mind flayers don't just come from the far realm but are still receiving instructions from it, compulsions that drive them toward this unification without understanding why. The implications of a direct far realm conduit existing within Faren are staggering. Every use of the Netherbrain's power potentially weakens the barriers between dimensions. Every psychic network it creates is another crack through which alien energies can seep. If the brain achieved its goal of connecting every mind on the Sword Coast, it might create a breach large enough for something to push through from the other side, something that makes even the Netherbrain look comprehensible by comparison. The unraveling. The journey to understanding the Absolute's true nature is masterfully paced throughout the game, with each revelation recontextualizing everything that came before. When you first approach Moonrise Towers, it appears as a beacon of dark power, a fortress where the Absolute's faithful gather in terrifying numbers. The tower stretches toward the sky like a finger pointing accusingly at the heavens, surrounded by shadows that seem to move with malevolent purpose. You expect to find a dark temple, perhaps a powerful cleric or chosen prophet. What you find instead is so much worse. Ketheric Thorm's presence immediately signals that something is different about this crisis. His inability to die isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's a narrative statement about the unnatural forces at work. When you strike him down and he simply stands back up, unmarred and unmoved, it becomes clear that you're dealing with something beyond conventional necromancy. The shadows that infest the land around Moonrise aren't just magical darkness. They're manifestations of divine corruption. The very air poisoned by the presence of powers that shouldn't exist in the same space. The descent into the Mind Flayer colony beneath Moonrise Towers marks a crucial turning point in understanding. The architectural impossibility of the space, vast chambers that couldn't physically fit beneath the tower, passages that loop back on themselves in defiance of geometry, hints at the alien intelligence behind it all. The walls pulse with a life of their own, organic and mechanical simultaneously, covered in mucus that seems to react to your presence. Pods containing infected victims line the halls, each one in various stages of transformation, some still human enough to beg for death, others too far gone to do anything but twitch in harmony with some unheard rhythm. The revelation that an elder brain lies at the heart of the Absolute cult should be shocking, but instead it feels inevitable. All the pieces suddenly click into place: the tadpoles, the psychic network, the hive mind mentality, the strategic infections. Of course it's an elder brain. What else could create such perfect coordination among so many disparate elements? What else could maintain such precise control over thousands of infected minds simultaneously? The brain floats in its pool, a grotesque mass of neural tissue that somehow radiates both immense intelligence and bottomless hunger. But even this revelation is incomplete. The true horror comes when you realize the brain is more than just enslaved, it's transformed into something unprecedented. The crown of Karsus hasn't just enhanced its power, it's fundamentally altered its nature. This isn't just an elder brain anymore, it's becoming something new, something that combines the worst aspects of illithid psychology with divine power and far-realm corruption. The Netherbrain represents an evolutionary leap that should be impossible. A being that transcends the normal categories of monster or villain. The colony itself serves as a massive support system for the brain's expansion. Cultivation chambers grow new strains of tadpoles, each batch slightly different, adapted for specific purposes or host types. Some tadpoles are designed for rapid transformation, others for extended infiltration. Some enhance physical capabilities, others unlock latent psychic potential. The variety suggests experimentation on a massive scale, thousands of lives used as test subjects to perfect the infection process. The presence of other mind flayers in the colony adds another layer of complexity. They serve the brain, but their behavior suggests they don't fully understand what they're serving. They perform their duties with typical illithid efficiency, but there's a nervousness to their movements, a hesitation that implies they sense something is wrong but can't quite articulate what. They've been told this is the grand design finally coming to fruition, but even their alien minds recognize that something about this situation defies their understanding of how the design should unfold. The confrontation with Ketheric in the depths of the colony represents not just a boss battle, but a philosophical reckoning. Here is a man who lost everything, who broke the world trying to bring back his daughter, who sold his soul to multiple dark powers in pursuit of an impossible dream. His defeat isn't triumphant, it's tragic. He dies realizing he was a pawn, that his daughter's resurrection was just another manipulation, that everything he sacrificed was for nothing. His final moments force us to confront the human cost of the Absolute's deception, the lingering shadow. The defeat of the Absolute, regardless of which ending players achieve, doesn't erase the scars left on the world. Thousands were infected, many transformed or killed, entire communities destroyed or corrupted beyond recognition. The psychological trauma extends far beyond the immediate victims. How do you trust again when you've seen loved ones turned into puppets? How do you have faith when you've witnessed a false god that felt more real than the true ones? The Sword Coast will bear these wounds for generations. The political ramifications ripple outward in waves that will shape the region's future for decades. Baldur's Gate's government was compromised at the highest levels. How many decisions were influenced by tadpole officials? How many laws were passed to facilitate the cult's spread? The city must essentially rebuild its entire power structure from scratch, never fully certain that all the infected have been identified and removed. Paranoia becomes policy, with mandatory psychic screenings and regular interrogations becoming the new normal. For those who survived infection without transforming, life becomes a daily struggle with the knowledge of what they almost became. The tadpole leaves traces even after removal, phantom sensations, dreams of the collective, moments where they catch themselves thinking thoughts that aren't quite their own. Support groups form for survivors, but how do you explain the experience to someone who wasn't there? How do you describe the seductive comfort of surrendering individuality, the terrifying peace of having every decision made for you? The religious implications shake the foundations of faith across Facade. If a false god can seem so real, can perform miracles, can answer prayers, what does that say about the nature of divinity itself? Some churches see their congregations swell, with people desperate for reassurance that their gods are real. Others, empty as former believers, decide that all faith might be just another form of manipulation. New cults spring up around the idea that the Absolute was real, that its defeat was a tragedy, that the unity it offered was humanity's best hope for transcendence. The knowledge that elder brains can be enhanced into netherbrains fundamentally changes the threat assessment of illithid colonies everywhere. Every known colony becomes a potential apocalypse waiting to happen. Adventuring parties are commissioned to seek out and destroy elder brains wherever they're found, leading to a new age of preemptive strikes that sometimes destroy innocent communities mistaken for illithid infiltration. The paranoia is justified but destructive, creating a climate of fear that the mind flayers can exploit even without the crown. The technological and magical innovations developed during the crisis have lasting effects. Gortash's steel watch, while ultimately corrupted, proved that mechanical soldiers are viable. Other cities begin developing their own versions, leading to an arms race of artificial warriors. The tadpole detection methods developed by desperate healers become standard medical practice. New wards against psychic intrusion are woven into civic infrastructure. The world adapts, but adaptation means acknowledging that such threats are not only possible, but probable. For the player character specifically, the burden of knowledge weighs heavy. You've seen behind the curtain of reality, witnessed powers that most people can't even conceive of. You know that gods can be tricked, that artifacts of unimaginable power exist in reachable places, that the barriers between dimensions are thinner than anyone wants to admit. How do you return to normal life after that? Many heroes of the absolute crisis find themselves unable to settle down, driven to seek out other threats before they can metastasize into similar catastrophes. The question of whether the threat is truly ended haunts everyone involved. The Netherbrain might be destroyed, but the knowledge of how to create one isn't. The crown of Karsus might be dealt with, but other artifacts of similar power exist. Most disturbingly, no one knows how many tadpoles might still be dormant in hidden places, waiting for the right trigger to activate. Every headache becomes suspicious, every bad dream potential evidence of lingering infection. The Absolute is defeated, but its shadow lingers in the paranoid checking of mirrors for signs of transformation. The potential for the grand design to continue through other means remains very real. The Illithids learned valuable lessons from this attempt. They saw how effective faith could be as a vector for infection, how humanoid psychology could be weaponized against itself. Other elder brains across the multiverse are processing this information, adapting their strategies, planning new approaches. The Absolute might have been a failure, but it was an instructive failure that brings the grand design closer to fruition. Some scholars theorize that the entire Absolute crisis was just a test run, a prototype for something larger. The speed of its spread, the effectiveness of its deception, the resources it accumulated, all of this data is now part of the collective Illithid knowledge base. The next attempt will be more subtle, more refined, more difficult to detect until it's too late. The victory over the Absolute might have just bought time, not true safety. The far realm influence introduced during the crisis doesn't simply disappear with the Netherbrain's destruction. Reality remains weakened in places, thin spots where alien energies continue to seep through. Strange phenomena plague areas where the brain's influence was strongest. Animals born with too many eyes that see things that aren't there. Plants that grow in impossible patterns. Weather that follows no natural law. These areas become quarantine zones, but quarantine implies containment, and how do you contain something that exists partially outside normal space-time? There's also the disturbing possibility that destroying the Netherbrain didn't actually sever its connection to the far realm, but instead release that connection to seek new anchors. Reports trickle in of people experiencing visions similar to those the infected reported, despite never being tadpoled. Dreams of impossible cities, knowledge of things they shouldn't know, the creeping sensation that reality is just one perspective among infinite equally valid alternatives. The infection might be gone, but the conceptual virus it represented continues to spread. Player choice significantly impacts how the aftermath unfolds. Those who chose to control the Netherbrain rather than destroy it face different moral quandaries. Even with the best intentions, wielding that kind of power changes a person. The temptation to use it for good causes, to end wars, to enforce peace, to eliminate suffering, becomes overwhelming. But every use makes the next use easier, the justifications more flexible. The road to becoming what you fought against is shorter than anyone wants to admit. For those who destroyed the brain entirely, questions linger about whether that was the right choice. Could controlled use of its power have prevented future tragedies? Was the moral high ground worth the lives that might be lost to threats that the brain's network could have prevented? These aren't questions with easy answers, and the game respects players enough not to provide them. The consequences of choice extend beyond the ending cutscene into implied futures that are both hopeful and terrifying. The transformation of those who fully became Illithids, whether by choice or circumstance, represents another ongoing tragedy. They retain their memories, their personalities, but filter through an alien consciousness that makes them fundamentally different. They're heroes who save the world, but they're also reminders of what the world almost became. Some integrate into society as best they can, others disappear into self-imposed exile, and still others embrace their new nature in ways that suggest the grand design's influence lingers in their transformed minds. The economic impact of the crisis reshapes trade and commerce across the Sword Coast. Cities that were infected become pariahs, their goods viewed with suspicion, their merchants subjected to additional scrutiny. New industries emerge around protection from psychic threats, amulet makers, ward scribes, and alienists who claim to detect and cure mental intrusion. The recovery creates opportunities for both legitimate business and charlatans who exploit the lingering fear for profit. Cultural expressions of the trauma manifest in art, literature, and performance. Plays about the absolute crisis become popular, though they often sanitize the horror into digestible heroic narratives. Songs spread through taverns, each retelling adding embellishments until the truth becomes indistinguishable from myth. Children play games of heroes and cultists, not understanding the genuine terror their parents experienced. The crisis becomes story, and story becomes legend, and legend becomes something that future generations might not believe actually happened. The academic response involves furious debate about the nature of consciousness, divinity, and free will. Philosophers argue whether the infected truly lost their autonomy or simply exchanged one form of influence for another. Theologians wrestle with the implications of a false god that felt real. Wizards study the interaction between psionics and traditional magic, seeking to understand and replicate the effects without the horror. Knowledge advances, but each advancement carries the risk of enabling the next catastrophe. The lasting legacy of the absolute crisis might not be the immediate damage but the loss of innocence it represents. The Sword Coast has faced threats before, dragons, demons, undead armies, but those were external dangers that could be fought with sword and spell. The Absolute represented internal corruption, the enemy within that looked like salvation. It exploited the best parts of human nature, the desire for belonging, purpose, and transcendence. How do you defend against something that offers everything you want while taking everything you are? For Keen 7 lore, this story represents one of gaming's most sophisticated narratives about power, control, and the horror of losing oneself. Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't just tell us about these themes, it makes us experience them through gameplay, through choices that have no perfect outcomes, through the gradual revelation that we've been deceived as thoroughly as any cultist. The Absolute isn't just a villain to defeat, but a mirror that reflects uncomfortable truths about faith, authority, and the seductive appeal of surrendering responsibility. As we reach the end of this deep dive into one of the most intricate deceptions in gaming history, I want to reflect on what makes the Absolute such a memorable antagonist. It's not just the scale of the threat or the cleverness of the plot. It's how the game makes us complicit in our own deception, how we want to believe we're special, that our infection is different, that we can control what's happening to us. The Absolute works as horror because it exploits the same psychological vulnerabilities in players that it does in its fictional victims. The true genius of Baldur's Gate 3's narrative is that it never lets us feel completely safe from the Absolute's influence. Even after we understand the deception, even after we know it's an elder brain and not a goddess, we still use the powers the tadpole grants us. We still form connections with other infected characters. We still, on some level, participate in the network we're trying to destroy. The game forces us to ask, if we use the enemy's tools to defeat the enemy, have we really won? Or have we just proven that the grand design was right all along? That unity, even forced unity, is more effective than independence? These questions don't have clean answers, and that's what elevates the Absolute from a simple antagonist to a philosophical challenge. It represents every tempting shortcut, every deal with the devil, every compromise of principle for the sake of power. It's the voice that whispers you could fix everything if you just had a little more control, if people would just listen to you, if you could make them understand. The Absolute is the dark mirror of every hero's journey, showing what happens when the desire to save the world becomes indistinguishable from the desire to control it. The possibility that this isn't over, that the grand design continues through other means, adds a layer of cosmic dread that extends beyond the game's boundaries. Every player who completes Baldur's Gate 3 carries with them the knowledge that victory might be temporary, that the forces they fought against are patient and eternal, while heroes are mortal and finite. The game doesn't end with, and they lived happily ever after, but with, and they remained vigilant, knowing that the shadow of the Absolute might fall again. If you've enjoyed this exploration of Baldur's Gate 3's masterful deception, this journey through the layers of lies that make the Absolute one of gaming's most compelling villains, please hit that like button and subscribe to Keen 7 Lore. Your support genuinely helps the channel grow. I'm working toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription brings me closer to that goal. It means the world to me that you've spent this time diving deep into the lore with me. Together, we can continue exploring the incredible stories, hidden meanings, and fascinating worlds that make gaming such a rich medium for storytelling. Thank you for joining me in the shadow of the Absolute, for walking through the deception with me, and for being part of the Keen 7 lore community. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, not everything that offers transcendence has your best interests at heart.